Welcome to episode 152 of Real Health Radio. You can find the links talked about as part of this episode at the show notes, which is www.7, so the word all spelled out, seven-health.com/152.
Welcome to Real Health Radio. Health advice that's more than just about how you look. And here's your host, Chris Sandel.
Hey everyone, welcome back and thanks for tuning in for another episode of Real Health Radio. This week it's another guest episode and I'm chatting with Ivy Felicia. Ivy is a certified holistic wellness coach and body image expert with a gift for helping people of all body types to embrace body peace and self-love at any stage of life. Her body relationship coaching work is centered on her personal experiences with barriers to body love and more than a decade of social and professional involvement in the emotional wellness and health education movements. I've been following Ivy for a while now. So she was brought to my attention by Drew, my intern. And since then, I've listened to her on a number of podcasts and made my way through most of her blog posts. And I liked what I was hearing and reading, and so I asked her to come on the show. And we cover a lot as part of this episode. We go through Ivy's early life and her experiences with food and dieting and exercise, her diagnosis with PCOS and how this was a blessing in disguise and led to lifestyle and career change. We talk about body peace and self-care and accepting your body even when it's changing. And we discuss Ivy's experience of being in the wellness space, considering she doesn't match up to many of the stereotypes of what someone in this space is meant to look like. Ivy was a great guest. We had some technical issues with Skype at the start, and so it meant we were then a little short on time, hence why this is shorter than my usual guest interviews. But I think we used the time really well, and there's a lot packed into this. Let's get on with the show. This is my interview with Ivy Felicia. Hey, Ivy, thanks for joining me on the show today.
Hi, Chris. Thank you for having me.
So, look, I want to talk about the work that you do in the wellness space and the clients that you serve, but I also want to go through your story and how you got to the place that you're in now. So I guess maybe as a good starting place, like what was food like for you in your household growing up?
Well, growing up for me, I would say that because I came from like actually a lower middle class family, and also sometimes food was one of those things where it was based on income, right? So There wasn't a lot of flexibility in the foods that we really had. And it was one of those things where you meet the basic needs and that was it. However, also a part of food relationship that I realized was a foundation to how I saw food later as an adult was that food was constantly the center of celebrations, which some people kind of vilify that. But I think, it was a good thing because, of course, you have holidays and birthday parties, but also, good grades and things like that.
Yep.
Food was never used for punishment, but it was definitely used for celebration.
Okay. And you talked about like the lower socioeconomics or sometimes, income factored into the foods you would be buying. How much was health talked about as part of food? Was that a conversation that was part of what you were eating when you were growing up?
Honestly, I love that you asked that question, Chris, because I don't think anyone's ever asked me that. But I feel like my parents did the best that they could with what they knew. So it was sort of the general, eat your broccoli kind of thing. Sure. Because you need to eat vegetables. And that was it. It really wasn't an expanded, vast perspective on, these foods are carbs or these foods are proteins. It was just sort of, you need to eat your broccoli, eat that, eat all your dinner. And that was the basics. It really wasn't anything in depth. And I really didn't learn about food nutrients and all of those things until much later becoming an adult.
Okay. And so what did your eating look like then as a child and then a teenager? Do you have a history of dieting?
I started dieting, actually, Chris, very early. So I started going to Weight Watchers. I've shared this story before. I started going before it was even the age where you were supposed to go. So meaning that my mother had to sign a waiver for me to go. And I've always been a higher weight individual compared to the social standards. So, I was a chubby kid starting in like kindergarten. If you see my preschool, kindergarten pictures, I was just chubby. And so as I became an adolescent and a teenager and got older, I was being bullied a lot and teased a lot. And it started to impact my self-esteem.
So with going to Weight Watchers, was that you saying to your mom, like, hey, can you take me along? Or was it her pushing the issue?
No, I think it was actually her trying to help me deal with bullying and teasing that I was going through at school. And because most of the teasing was based on my size and my weight, I think her solution was, okay, let's help you lose weight so that you don't have to go through that. And she was going to Weight Watchers herself. And I remember it was sort of this conversation around, oh, I want to go too so I can lose weight so I don't have to go through this bullying.
Sure. And so was that then the kind of the start of a dieting, I don't know, many years?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That began my obsession with dieting and weight loss for over 2 decades. I would say at least 20 to 25 years. I was an avid dieter. And then as I moved into adulthood, I started adding an extreme fitness on top of extreme dieting. And it was all in an attempt to, be in a smaller body.
And with you said added on extreme fitness there, like as a kid, were you active? Were you into different sports?
Actually, I was not. Ironically, I often say when I talk to like my husband and friends like that, I actually avoided physical activity as a child. And I thought that I wasn't good at it, and I was told that I wasn't good at it. So some of it was also body shame because, physical activity involves you're in a larger body and you approach fitness from a different perspective, which I know that now. But as a child, I just saw myself as not being as good as other people. So I sort of shied away from it. So I wasn't in any sports as a child. When I was in PE, I tried to avoid it at all costs. So I definitely was not a physically active child.
And so did that mean that later on when you got into it, it was solely for the like the weight loss benefits or supposed weight loss benefits of it? I know you may have later on got into exercise for other reasons, but is that how it really started out?
That's absolutely how it started out. That's the only thing I thought it was for. Once I started getting into fitness, I just thought it was, here's a way that if I add this with the dieting, that I can, lose weight. And so it was solely for weight loss. Sure.
And I know, like from kind of reading your story and for doing prep for this, that at some point you were diagnosed with PCOS. So when did that happen?
I was diagnosed with PCOS in 1997. And so that was right after I had graduated high school.
And what led up to this diagnosis? Like what symptoms were you getting, or what made you go to the doctor and get things tested?
I was having irregular periods. That was the major symptom when I first had went to the doctors. And irregular for me was I would literally go maybe 4, 5, 6 months at a time and not be having a period. And then after a while, I was having excessive weight gain in a short amount of time. And so I just started noticing like the physical changes in my body. And I actually, because I was in college at the time, I did research and I did a paper on PCOS. And that was sort of a light bulb for me that, hey, I think might be what I have. So it was sort of like, I always say universe was sort of guiding me to getting an answer to my own life and what was going on.
Wow. So had you started doing the research on PCOS and then this paper came up, or was kind of the other way around?
It was actually the other way around. I was doing the paper and I was already having the irregular periods and all of that. And then I did the paper and I realized, wait a minute, this is what's going on with me. And that's when I went to the doctor and I said, I think this might be what's happening. Of course, back then, we're talking 1997. Doctors knew very little they don't know much now about it, but they definitely didn't know a lot about it then.
And so what was your experience like of going to the doctor?
At that time, the doctors just told me that I should take birth control pills to help regulate my period and to lose weight. And so that, of course, reinforced the mindset that was already there, being obsessed with weight loss and fitness and things like that. And so I started to feel a lot of guilt and shame and blaming myself for what was going on in my body as far as PCOS.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
And was that, you mentioned 97. I'm trying to remember what was going on in the fitness crazes back then. Was low carb diets what was recommended then as part of that, or it was just like weight loss at sort of any cost?
It was weight loss at any cost. There's a rhyme there. But it wasn't low carb then, like, all the other things, paleo and those things hadn't come out yet. And the low carb hadn't come. I wasn't aware of it at that time. It was, for me, and what I heard was just sort of minimize your food, lower your calories, and increase your fitness. And so that's what I was doing. Okay.
And how did all of those things help the PCOS?
They didn't. They didn't. It got worse. The only thing that I would say that I sort of figured out on my own is that I started eating more live foods. So I got more into, fruits and vegetables and things like that. And I started cutting back. I did, again, my own research and started cutting back on foods that were high in hormones and things like that, just kind of being aware of that. I started lowering some of my stress levels and things like that. This was all based on just intuition for me. Yeah. And my period actually did start regulating itself a few years later. And knock on wood, it's been pretty like clockwork since then.
Wow. And so what was the transition like? How do you transition from what you've described already, where you're dieting all the time, I'm imagining not having a great relationship with your body, to then like doing what you're doing now?
Wow, that's a big transition, right?
Yeah.
The irony is I tell my clients now and I tell people that PCOS was one of the most difficult and hardest things to go through. But at the same time, PCOS was my gift. And what I mean by that was that trying to figure out how to manage PCOS and how to just thrive with it was what sort of guided me to finding holistic wellness. And so the last straw for me was that I went to a traditional doctor, and his final analysis was, you just need to get weight loss surgery. As a matter of fact, he gave me a paper and a recommendation of who I could go to and who I should go to for weight loss surgery. And I was just so overwhelmed and frustrated that I was just ready to just give up on trying to do anything. And I actually found a holistic wellness doctor by accident. She was married to my dentist. And so they had a sort of like a business together, and I saw her card in the lobby, and I just took it and I was like, okay, this is my last try. And I reached out to her, and she was the first physician to treat me as a whole person. So she was the first person to ask me about my stress levels, my sleep, whether I had ever tried yoga, what was my support system like. She was the first person to introduce a holistic perspective to wellness.
Wow. So very lucky that she shared an office or was married to your dentist.
Yeah.
And so what did it look like then working with them?
It was such a breath of fresh air, Chris, because, as we just talked about, this long journey for me as this human in this body that just constantly felt problematic, as a child, feeling overweight, as an adult, having a chronic illness, feeling like it was my fault, feeling like my body was a prison, being at war with my body, doing everything I could to control it and change it and everything. And to finally find someone who was willing to help me figure out what wellness looked like for me, and who never talked to me about, well, I won't say she didn't focus on my weight. And it was the first time that someone treated me as a human and wasn't treating my weight.
And so with that, I mean, how long did it take? And I know life is a constant journey, but how long did it take for you to then start to make changes and to really go from where you currently were until, okay, things are really looking quite different now?
Yeah. Right away. After I had my visit with her and she gave me a full report of, the different intersections of wellness and what my life looked like overall. And I looked at that report and it just was a light bulb of, I need to change my entire life. And that's what I did. Actually, like within less than a year, I turned my whole life around. I left corporate America. I lowered my stress. I started trying yoga. I took a holistic perspective to food. I became so passionate about it because I started feeling more alive. I started feeling more connected to my body that I actually went to school for holistic wellness to become a coach. Well, I actually started out with just a passion around learning more about it. And then that sort of evolved into actually wanting to coach and help other people as well.
And was there, like when you were working with her, was there much of focus on like being kind to your body, or the way that you talk to your body, or like kind of more around the relationship with body as opposed to just the food side of things?
There was, but some of that actually came from just my own journey, right? So hers was more on the wellness side of things. Sure. And the body relationship part, that came from just my own intuitive experience and realizing, okay, it's not just what you're feeding your body. It's not just how you're moving your body. It's the actual energetic exchange that you're having with your body that needs to shift.
And that, I love the way you described that there. And so I want to go through that more. But when you were studying, did you have this specific idea in mind of like, okay, this is the kind of niche that I want to go after, or this is how I want to be focusing on things with my clients, or it was more just I want to do holistic wellness and we'll just see where it goes?
It started out as I want to do holistic wellness. Diet culture was still kind of tied up in there, especially since I had been saturated in it for years. And so it did take a few years of unlearning. It took studying about, health at every size and body acceptance. And just as time went along, it was a very organic evolution of this blending of body relationship with holistic wellness.
Okay. And so how do you describe what you do now? Or how do you describe the kinds of people that you work with?
So now I am the body relationship coach, and I work with women of all sizes, shapes, and body types. I tend to attract women who have chronic illness, and that's probably because my story resonates with other people. But I help them make peace with their bodies through weight neutral, holistic wellness, and radical self-care.
So the body piece part that you mentioned there, and I know when I was, again, doing prep for this, there was a lot of that coming up as part of your site. So what is body peace, and what does that like mean for either you or for your clients?
Sure. So I say it sounds really simplistic, but I say that body peace is basically choosing not to respond to your body with negative energy, no matter what. So it looks very different. I started out saying body love. I think this is a really important part of the story because what I found with clients was that body love was overwhelming and it was too difficult for some people, particularly people who might have chronic illness or are differently abled or have some sort of reason as to why it's more challenging for them to love their body. So I moved into the space of body peace because I do believe that peace is something we can choose at any time. So even though there might be different parts of your body that you don't like, or you might have an illness, or maybe you're differently abled, that's okay. Like, it's okay to be frustrated with that, or it's okay to say, I don't like that. But you can still choose peace, which means that you are choosing not to wage war against your body for the things that you don't like.
And so then the self-care piece, like, is this, does self-care and body peace go hand in hand, or how do you think about the self-care piece?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is such a foundation of the work of my life and the work that I do with other people, sort of teaching them how to use self-care rituals, how to use energy management, how to prioritize their self-care in a way that helps them sort of reconnect with their body in a compassionate way. But it also helps them to maintain a compassionate relationship with their body.
Could you give some like tangible examples of what either self-care practices would look like, or what someone could be doing to be getting body peace?
Sure. So one of the things that I tell people to do is to start with listening to the body, right? And that's because a lot of us don't realize how much we ignore our bodies.
Yeah.
And because we're so tuned into society, social expectations, and what other people have, doctors and things like that, what they have to say about our bodies, that we don't know what our bodies need. And so sometimes that self-care can look like just starting with a day and listening to the signals that your body is giving you. Maybe it's saying that it's tired, or maybe you notice that you're thirsty, or maybe you notice that your skin is drier than normal, or maybe you notice that you have a pain somewhere that you've sort of been not paying attention to, or just sort of numbing with medication and things like that. So that is how you just sort of start to ground yourself and reconnect with your body. Also, I talk to people about how you can create very accessible rituals that work. Like for some of my clients, a ritual for them looks like every single day they take like a 15-minute moment to go out and be in nature. And that's their way of taking the time to reconnect with their body during that time in nature, to unplug from all the devices, to get away from the office or the kids or whatever, and just sort of be with themselves. So just things like that help you to start slowing down, listening to your body. And then that opens the door to start building body trust.
Nice. And one of the things that's common with the clients that I work with, and I'm assuming it's possibly the same with you, is when like the body is changing. And this could be because of quitting restriction or dieting. It could be someone getting over an eating disorder or because of an illness. And so it's not that I just have to accept how my body is like now and I know how it is now. But I don't know what's going on. Like it started to change. I'm starting to put on weight or there's some kind of change. So is this something that you deal with?
Absolutely. I love this question. Because this is one of my favorite parts of talking about body relationship is change. It's been personal for me as a person who lives with chronic illness. And I also talk about with clients, like you said, sometimes the body will shift, whether the size, gets larger, sometimes it gets smaller. What I try to help people understand is that your relationship with your body is a journey. It's not a destination. And so there will be ebbs and flows. And this is where body peace is really pivotal, because as you go through the changes, there will be changes that you don't like. And I think it's about creating the space for it to be okay that, with the fact that we might not like what goes on with our body. Yeah. And we might not like a change that we see, like maybe, you get your hair changes, or like you said, your body size changes, or your skin changes, or maybe you even have a situation where you have some sort of accident and something changes with your body. We never know what life can hold for us. But the most important thing is to give yourself permission to feel the feelings and the emotions that come up with those changes, right?
Yeah. Be
okay with feeling those emotions, but still choosing not to turn against your body for the changes, because, our body is doing the best that it can in every situation to keep us alive.
Definitely. And I think, at least from the clients that I've dealt with around this, the big concern or the thing that really it's hard for them is just that lack of certainty and the unknown of like, where is this going to end? And so I think you're right, like often in those situations, people will turn against their body, or maybe not even intentionally turn against their body, but they'll want to grasp onto something that gives them that illusion of certainty. And for so many people, that is, well, I'm going to ramp up the exercise again, or I'm going to start the restricting again, or whatever it may be. Is that the same with clients you work with?
Yes. And this is where that self-care piece comes in and is really important, because this is where you have to go back to like what I call the toolkit, which is that radical self-care, or the rituals that you've created, or things that help ground you and give you some sense of peace. Because when things are shifting around us, like you say, we look for something that's familiar. So that's where, creating rituals, creating things that we do regularly for self-care is important, because it can be a grounding tool just to kind of help us feel safer and more at home in a body that might not quite feel like home in that moment, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So something else I wanted to chat about. You wrote on Instagram, wellness does not exclusively belong to one race, size, body type, or socioeconomic status. Mm-hmm. So I think within society, we have this kind of stereotype of what someone within wellness may look like or may be like, and you're someone who doesn't meet up to those kind of stereotypes. So what was it like, especially starting out? Did you have thoughts about this in terms of like how am I going to make this work? Because maybe I'm not what people think of when they think of wellness.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Especially when I very, very, very first got into it, and I still had some diet culture mentality, and I still was learning to make peace with my body, or I thought I had to love it and all those things. It was very, it was a pressure. And I thought, I wouldn't show up in spaces and say, I'm a wellness coach, or I work with wellness. Or if I did, I saw people's reactions, because they immediately look at your body and I'm in a marginalized body in a number of ways. I'm a person of color. I'm a person of size. I also have a chronic illness. So these are all the things that, according to society, would exclude me from being a person who even knows about wellness, let alone would be able to teach other people.
And so how has the experience been so far? So since the starting point?
So I sort of had to flip it upside down, right, and change my perspective. And what I realize now is that it is all of those things about me that make me unique are the very same things that make me an awesome wellness coach, because of the fact that I live in this very unique body with all of these different challenges. It gives me a different perspective on what wellness can be. And it gives me a fresh perspective on how we can expand wellness outside of this sort of traditional definition of what health and wellness is supposed to be.
And so is that something that is a big focus of what you do and part of your message?
Yes, absolutely. So now that's the foundation. That's the foundation of, I say now my healthy is not your healthy, right? Health exists on a continuum. What's healthy for you, Chris, is not the same as what's healthy for me. We have different bodies. We have different circumstances. We have access to different resources. We might have different socioeconomic lifestyles right now. Also, another thing about health being on a continuum is that it's on a continuum for us as individuals. So my healthy today might look very different from my healthy 5 years ago, right? Or something might happen, like we just mentioned, where we go through some sort of body change, and we can't expect the same thing from our body, in every stage of life, which is why that's part of what I say. And my tagline is teaching people that you can learn to embrace your body in every stage of life. So 10 years from now, 20 years from now, I can't think that health would look the same as it does for me today. So just sort of expanding, right, that perspective of what does wellness mean, and also bringing people who are in the margins back into the center of that conversation and making it more accessible.
Definitely. Because, there's lots there that I would love to kind of dig into or respond to. But I think what happens is you make wellness something that is very exclusive and very difficult for people to attain. But also it becomes what they're trying to attain is also not real. Because it's lost all context. So you have this idea of good foods or bad foods or healthy diet and unhealthy diet, but without it actually attached to any particular kind of outcome. And with people just trying to follow these ideas because this is what they've been told to do, but without all of the work that you've been talking about in terms of let's then turn this inwards. Let's pay attention to what does actually support my body. And so you get into a situation where wellness is just this thing that becomes so unattainable and just makes people feel worse about themselves when actually there's a lot that you can do all the way along the spectrum.
Yes, I love that. I love that so much.
And so you're also a member of the Association for Size Diversity in Health. So for those who are unaware of what this organization is, can you explain about it?
Yes. So the focus is, again, sort of like what we've been talking about here, is just to sort of bring people who have been pushed out to the margins back into the center and practicing inclusion and body diversity when we're talking about health, and expanding that conversation and expanding that definition as well. And so a lot of times, like you said, people, when you think of wellness, you only think of smaller bodies. You also only think of you exclude certain races. You might even exclude people who are differently able and things like that. So the focus when it comes to size diversity in health is saying, hey, let's make wellness about inclusion and diversity. And again, making it more accessible for people to define health on their terms.
Yeah. There was something I read on your blog that I'd really like you to chat about, because it's something that I would want to start recommending to clients, and I'd never heard someone refer to it before, which was called like flashback forgiveness. I don't remember how long ago you wrote this, but do you remember what this was?
That was a while ago. I think that was when we were talking about pictures, right?
Yes.
Yes. And so that was sort of an answer to, and it's still a trend, to the before and after pictures, right? And so I was trying to get, like, people have this thing where they like to put their beginner's body next to, like, they have a goal body. And so they start with these pictures of, look at me now. And then as they go along, they have this motivation to minimize their body, to shrink their body in size. And then they'll put pictures next to their body and sort of shame where they, quote unquote, were, or what size they were. And they want, like, praise for minimizing their bodies. And so I wrote a blog about why I don't do that and why I feel that before and after pictures are actually quite detrimental to our mental and emotional well-being, as well as, they sort of take the focus off of what wellness really is. And so I think the flashback forgiveness that I was talking about at that time was, hey, this is sort of another way that you can use pictures in a positive way. And so I was talking about looking at pictures of yourself. And if you see pictures, let's say from high school, because a lot of us are saying, oh, I wish I could have my high school body or whatever. But maybe there's something in that high school picture that triggers emotions for you that maybe are of shame or sadness or frustration or whatever around how you feel about your body now. And rather than comparing, looking at those pictures and sort of using them for a practice of forgiveness and embracing who you have been in every stage of your life. And so now for me, when I can look at a picture of me being 16, 17, I can say, you know what, I really appreciate that Ivy, because these are the things that she lived through. These are the things that she was able to survive and be resilient over. And I love her. And that helps me to love the Ivy that I am now, rather than looking back and sort of comparing and contrasting myself from a space of negative energy and shame.
Yeah. And what I like about this is it adds the full dimensions to those pictures and where someone was out at that in their life at different stages, because I think it can be very easy to look at certain pictures with rose-tinted glasses, or to look at others where you talk about how unhappy you were, but there's a lot more context to all of those things that then get left behind. So I just thought of this as an exercise. There's probably a handful of clients where this would be really helpful for them, just to add those different layers as they look at photos throughout their life.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up.
So you, as part of, you've got 2 Instagram accounts. Am I right in thinking that you also have an account called Fat Women of Color? Is that correct? Fat Women of Color is an Instagram account that I started, I think it was a little over 2 years ago now, that is also has like blossomed into its own movement. And is that, like, did you see that, okay, like body acceptance was taking off, but it was then still like white bodies that were kind of being accepted in larger bodies? Is that part of what was behind that decision?
Yes. So what I saw and what there's been a lot of conversation around is the fact that, women of color have been pushed out into the margins when it comes to the body positive, body acceptance, fat acceptance movement. Although women of color started at the center of the movement and were a very big part of it, that somehow they've been pushed out into the margins. So it was to address that. It's also mostly focused on creating a safe space where we can talk about what does it feel like to live at the intersections of being a woman, being a person of color, and living in a larger body. And how when you have those intersections happening, your experience in the world is quite unique.
And have you also got an event coming up as part of this, the Take Up Space event? Is that right?
Yes, I'm so excited. As soon as you say it, like I started smiling. Yes. We are having an event in Atlanta, Georgia, here in the United States, and it is June the 8th. And we had the first one last year in Washington, D.C., and it was so amazing because what we do is create a live space for Black and brown women of size to come together and share sisterhood and support. And, it's a safe space where people can talk about the beauties and the challenges of being Black and brown women of size.
And so it's like workshops, there's people giving talks, that kind of thing?
Yeah, we actually have what we call a sister chat, which is a panel of women who sort of share their stories, and it stimulates conversation where the other women in the room can hear and be inspired, and they can also ask questions. We have Black and brown women of size who are performers, who are poets and dancers and things like that. We've got like giveaways and sponsors and all of that. So yeah, it's kind of a mix of social as well as empowerment at the same time.
Great. Well, yeah, I look forward to hearing how that all goes. And so I guess just before I wrap this up, my final question is like, what could wellness be doing better at? And I know that could be a very open-ended question and go on for a long time, but is there anything that comes to mind that we haven't touched on already?
I would just say the main thing is like, let's just open our minds about wellness and open our minds, open our hearts, open our doors. And what I mean by doors is, stop pushing people out of the wellness community. Let's start welcoming more people in. Let's start being open-minded about wellness, what wellness is and who wellness includes. And let's also have more diversity and inclusion when it comes to leaders in wellness, right? So people like me who have a lot to share around wellness, let's start creating spaces for diversity in leadership when it comes to wellness as well.
Okay. And I completely agree with you on that. So Ivy, this has been wonderful. Where can people go to find out more information about you?
Sure. So they can go to mebodyandlove.com. That's my website. On Instagram, you can find me. Of course, we talked about Fat Women of Color is on Instagram, as well as I am Ivy Felicia, Felicia. And you can always call me as well, which is in the United States is 404-997-8814.
Okay, perfect. Well, look, I will put all of that in the show notes. But yeah, once again, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's just been great, Ivy.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Thanks for listening to Real Health Radio. If you are interested in more details, you can find them at the 7 Health website. That's www.7health.com.